welcome to this episode of John's Motorcycle Rescue and Review. Today I am comparing two of my favorite muscle cruisers, and the first one is Honda's beautiful 1980 CB900 Custom, and the second one is Suzuki's 1983 GS1100GL. On paper, these bikes are both very similar. They both have shaft drive, big air-cooled 4-cylinder engines, dual disc brakes up front. They both have classic cruiser styling, and they both came with air-assisted suspension front and back. They were both designed to compete in the cruiser market, and they basically were designed to a very similar goal, but from the seat of the pants, when you drive these bikes, you wouldn't think so. They really drive differently, and they really have different personalities. And even in the introduction clip that you saw earlier in this video, you can tell that there's a difference in personality. The ride on the Suzuki is much firmer. It has very crisp brakes from the factory, and it has just one of the all-time great powerhouse, stone simple, air-cooled 4-cylinder motors of that time period. In contrast, the Honda really does soak up the bumps. It rides much more smoothly. The engine vibration is minimal on the Honda. It's not bad on the Suzuki, but you'll definitely notice it more. The handling on both of these bikes is actually very, very good, although they kind of go about things a little bit differently. The Honda feels a little bit long and low, but it really is stable in the corners and just glides through them easily. It soaks up the bumps. It's pretty effortless to just wind through the corners. It's quiet and composed. I have upgraded the brakes on the Honda because from factory they weren't quite as good as the Suzuki brakes. Interestingly, even though the Honda has essentially an overdrive in its transmission, so once you get to 5th gear in low range, you can shift it into high range and essentially have a 6th gear. It is still geared lower than the 5-speed Suzuki is. And so it's a good thing that the motor on the Honda is smooth, because it does run at a higher RPM in top gear than the Suzuki at an equivalent speed. Some nice features that the Suzuki has that the Honda does not have. The Suzuki has a gas gauge, and it also has a gear indicator. And both of these are honestly tremendously nice features. The Honda, I think, it feels like the build quality may be a little bit higher on the Honda. It definitely feels it's more complex to work on, and it's a little bit more involved to work on than the Suzuki. But when I bought these bikes, I had to do less to the Honda to get it to where it is now than I did to the Suzuki. I've replaced the electrics on the Suzuki. I've replaced the clutch on the Suzuki. I also replaced the handlebar, because the stock handlebar on the Suzuki, it just pulled back too far and was not comfortable. Whereas the Honda with the stock bar is actually very comfortable. So we'll take a look, we'll ride these bikes. I'll give you a little bit of ride footage here, and I'll kind of go over what they're like to ride, and then we'll come back and wrap this up. I'm riding Honda's 1980 CB900 Custom. And every time I ride this bike, I am just really amazed at how smooth and nice it is to ride. It's got just a fantastic way that it soaks up bumps. The engine is just electric motor smooth, and the transmission shifts nicely. It does have, I'm running right now in overdrive,
and or high range, whatever you want to call it, and the bike just goes down the road so smoothly and just barely any engine vibration. The bike is a stable handling platform. It handles nicely, and the suspension is a nice compromise of it's firm but certainly not too firm, and it just does a great job of soaking up the bumps, and at the same time just providing a nice, it never really wiggles or wobbles or does stuff that makes you concerned about what the bike is going to do. Now, I have upgraded the brakes on this bike with Spiegler steel braided brake lines and new pads, and braking performance is just awesome. Very, very little braking pressure is required on the handlebar, and just runs really nice. Stops really well. And this bike with the stock exhaust on it, it's kind of sneaky fast. It doesn't really advertise that it's going fast. And it's not a bike that pushes you to go fast. It's a bike that just allows you to enjoy, but it has so much capability that you can really hustle it through the corners, and without, you don't even have to rev it super high. It doesn't really have quite as much mid-range and low-end torque as, say, an 1100cc Suzuki, but that's not surprising given that it's about 300 cc's less in the motor department. It's still very close on paper to like if you would run it at the drag strip against a Suzuki. And if I put a 4-into-1, you know, good quality 4-into-1 pipe on this thing, I'm sure it would sound really good, although it doesn't sound bad with a stock exhaust. I drive this bike because it's got relatively low gearing, even in overdrive, even in the high range. I almost always simply leave it in high range. It's a little bit almost redundant, because even in high range it's geared lower than the Suzuki. But seating position is very comfortable. I'm a tall guy, and so buckhorn bars like the Suzuki had really fold me up, and I don't have any control, and this is nice. I've got a little bit of a reach. They're kind of low and wide, so they give nice leverage going through the turns. This bike carburetes just about perfectly, and I really enjoy riding it. It's a super smooth place to be. And when I ride this bike, if I had to use some adjectives to describe it, I would say it's relaxing to drive, very confidence-inspiring, smooth, and it just, from the way that it shifts to the way that the instrumentation looks to paint quality and everything, it seems, and it definitely feels like a very nice quality product. Yeah, this thing is a little bit of a hot ride. I love it. I've got the Delcovic 4-into-1 pipe on this, and it sounds so nice. But by the same token, this bike is a bike that if you want to just tool around and go slow on, it's just perfectly happy to do that as well. But it has that engine note that's a little bit addictive. So how does this bike compare with the Honda that I just rode? Well, it's a much more direct feel. It's still a smooth ride. It's got a great motor in it. The handling on this bike is nice. With the way I have the bars set up, it feels a little bit more sporty than the Honda. And if I would change the bar on the Honda, it would also feel similar. But the suspension is definitely firmer from stock. I haven't had to do anything to the brakes on this bike, and they're shockingly good. So I'm happy with the brake setup on this bike from the factory. The seat on this bike is one of it's the most comfortable of the muscle cruiser seats. It's very nice. And I do love the fact that this bike has a fuel gauge, and I love the fact that it has the gas gauge as well. And on a tighter back road, this bike would probably be a little quicker than the Honda, only because the wheelbase is shorter. And so it turns in, like low speed turn-in on this bike is fantastic. It snaps into a corner. The front end really, it's got a little bit narrower tire as well than the Honda, and maybe a little bit, I'm not sure if the diameter of the wheel is smaller, but it definitely turns in a lot quicker. Both of these bikes actually have adequate, more than adequate ground clearance. I've never dragged hard parts on either one. Although I'm not driving them like I would a sport bike. Although the Honda has a nicer ride, the combination of the seat and the ergonomics on this bike really make it an all-day comfortable bike as well. The motor has a little bit more vibration than the Honda, but it's still very smooth. If I had to just describe this bike in a couple of words, it would just be fun. It feels like a hot rod, but it's also confidence inspiring. It's just amazing to me how different both of these bikes feel, both the CB900 Custom and the GS1100, the feel that they have. And I would say, you know, what the Suzuki lacks maybe in some of Honda's refinement, it definitely makes up for in character.
Okay, so we're back from the ride, and boy, I'll tell you what, these two bikes are so different in the way that they go about doing the same thing. And it really makes it tough to pick a winner between these two. And for me, it's like having two flavors of ice cream that you really like. And it's nice to have a choice. It's nice to be able to ride one over the other, depending on what you want to do and depending on your mood. I'm going to have to call this one just a toss-up. I think these are both fantastic motorcycles. If you happen to own one or are looking at picking up one of these bikes, you really can't go wrong with either one. It seems to me that parts availability and ease of working on things is a little bit better on the Suzuki currently. So if your bike needs a little bit more restoration, then that's something to keep in mind. That may be a factor for you. But they're both great machines. And like I say, it just depends on, you know, if I'm looking to just kind of go around and drive a hot rod and enjoy that aspect of things, I would take the Suzuki. if I just want a really nice, refined ride and really nice suspension compliance, I'll take the Honda. They both just ride fantastically nicely, and either one of them is just a great place to be. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Stay tuned for more. I'm working on some more muscle cruiser comparisons and some more projects, so we'll keep you informed. Have a great day.